Founded in 1903, Fountain was a railroad town and a center of farming in the region through the 1960s. In its heyday, Saturdays were so crowded, locals remember, that the sidewalks were elbow to elbow with farmers and family on their weekly excursion to town. From its beginning, when logging was its commercial interest, Fountain has been centered around the one-block business district that developed along with the East Carolina Railway. Like many towns of its time, alleyways were integral parts of the businesses on both sides of its block, for access to parking and for receiving materials, and the warehouses along the tracks were active with shipping, sales, and auctions. At its peak, the Eureka Logging Company near here was shipping 60,000 board feet a week to its mill in Washington, North Carolina. But by 1910, the logging industry started giving way to the family farm as the dominant force behind the town's economy. Fountain was a center for commerce for the area's farmers, whose principal crop was first cotton and later tobacco. Area farmers also raised corn, beans, peanuts, black-eyed peas, and field peas. No matter the crop, the principal machine in the field was the mule, and Fountain was where you came to buy, sell, and trade mules. But it was also home to a sawmill, a cotton gin, grist mill, tin shop, and blacksmith shop. There was a time when you could buy in Fountain anything you'd need on a modern farm, before modern meant having a tractor. Today, Mickey's cheese biscuits might be Fountain's best-known commodity, other than the rocks at Martin Marietta Aggregates. But Fountain still has several thriving businesses, a recreational park in the works, and it's proud to still be known as a family town. Even at 100 years old, Fountain is one of Pitt County's youngest towns. Welcome! We hope you enjoy this video tour and that you'll also find the time, less than half an hour, to walk it. The Frank Lynch House is the town's oldest. Lynch was in charge of the Eureka Lumber Company's logging operations in the area, and this house was built in 1901, the same year the East Carolina Railway arrived in Fountain. The I.J. Edwards building was a general merchandise store where Lester Flatt and Earl Scruggs once played on a whistle-stop tour. The livery was probably built as an automobile garage, but was later converted into a place where mules were brokered. On the lots behind these buildings were rental stables, where folks who wanted to spend the day in town would check their buggies, and their mule or horse would be tended. The depot, built about 1905, is the only surviving example of a masonry train station in Pitt County. Most of the warehouses up and down where the railroad tracks used to run were built before 1923, and like the other warehouses about town, they would generally have been owned by individual businesses for storage of groceries, grain, hay and feed, lumber, fertilizer, lime, and cement. Across the street, you see the Smith-Yelverton building, the western half of the building that the town's founder, R.A. Fountain, had constructed by R.J. Proctor of Nashville, North Carolina, in 1917. Fountain's previous store was on this site but faced the railroad tracks. It burned in November 1916, and its ruins were for several days a regional tourist attraction. Local reports credited the heroic efforts of our fire brigade for saving the nearby stores and warehouses. Arson was suspected. What's called today the Watershed was once the town's jail and town hall, built in the 19-teens. The coin-operated Watershed is still used by farmers. Once, the mules and wagons would be lined up on the highway half a mile, locals say, when it was crop spraying time. The town's electric works were developed in the 19-teens by a consortium of locals, including Dr. Beasley. Lights went out at 10 p.m. They flashed at 9:45 as a warning. For dances at the Development Building, the power stayed on until 11 p.m. The works here were in operation until 1920, when the town first began purchasing its utilities from Farmville. Dr. E.B. Beasley was the town's physician from 1913 to 1967. He had this office constructed in the 1940s. His original office, possibly the oldest doctor's office in Pitt County, was moved to its present site just north of the community store. Dr. Beasley's portrait hangs in the Wellness Center, where you can also read a partial list of locals whom he delivered. The Beasley House was built in the late teens. It has been extensively remodeled and is today one of the town's handsomest examples of the colonial revival style. Precise construction dates on many of Fountain's houses are hard to determine. Conflicting local legend places either the Eagles House or the original R.A. Fountain House as the town's second oldest, both built about 1905 and both extensively remodeled since. They originally consisted of just the front 3 rooms. The Beasleys lived in this Fountain House while theirs was being constructed. Across the street is the George Lane House, constructed about 1916. R.A. Fountain's house was built in 1909. Family remembered moving day when they all rode around the block in a buggy to their grand new home, built in colonial revival style with Tuscan columns, a porte-cochere, and a pavilion on its wraparound porch. The second floor served as a teacherage for many years. A 3-bay garage on the lot housed wooden bed delivery trucks for Mr. Fountain's coal and wood delivery enterprises. Bob Fountain was a railway agent, postmaster, school board member, bank trustee, and town commissioner, as well as a daily presence at his store, always in a white, long-sleeved shirt and tie. The R.A. Gardner House was built in 1905 by the man who owned the first car in town, a 1912 red Ford. Because his brother was Ava Gardner's father, young Ava often played in the yard here on family visits. It was originally a 1-story house facing Lang Street. If you walk this tour, you might see Norman Gardner, who'll point out the room he was born in 1920. Before the town got water and electric works, the Gardners furnished water for several houses in the neighborhood from a well in their backyard. The Fountain Presbyterian Church was organized in 1912. This building, in Gothic Revival style, was constructed between 1924 and 37. The original church was moved just down the street and converted into a house. The George W. Jefferson House was built in 1917 and is an exceptional example of the craftsman bungalow style that was popular throughout town. Fountain Baptist Church was constructed in 1951. Its original building, which dated to the church's organization in 1909, was moved to East Mill Street, where for many years it was the home of the St. James Free Will Baptist Church. The Henry Clay Jefferson House, built about 1910 in Victorian style, was hit by lightning on July 11, 2003. It was vacant and for sale at the time. The W.D. Gaynor House was built about 1920 as a modest 2-room house with a hall and back kitchen, but it was later remodeled into the craftsman bungalow style. The Carter Smith House is home to the former 6-term mayor whose wife, Mary Carolyn Reddick, wrote A History of Fountain, which is out of print. Built in the early teens, it's the only example in town of a Queen Anne-inspired cottage. Note the Lester Gay windmill in the yard. Behind were Reddick's rental stables that ran the length of the block, where you could rent a horse and buggy rig for a date or a family excursion, or a mule for your farm work. The Fountain Theater was operated on this site for many years by the Tarkington family of Four Oaks. It had a balcony for black patrons. It was later converted into a laundromat before being demolished in 1998. Downtown Fountain was once dominated by general merchandise stores, some of which had specialty lines. As we tour the business district today, try to imagine a time when as many as 7 general merchandise stores competed with each other on this one little block. Our tour of the northeast side of Wilson Street starts with the BB&T building, but first we'll glance down the main commercial alley in town. The lot behind this alley would be filled with parked buggies on Saturdays. From the rear, you can see where the BB&T expanded to take over a smaller building that was probably once a drugstore. Before it was BB&T, it was the Bank of Edgecombe, which had bought out the Bank of Fountain. The first business on this site was probably a millinery shop run by Mrs. M.D. Yelverton. Later, a gas station and cafe was on the site. Where our library now stands was G.W. Jefferson's General Merchandise. It has the only pressed tin ceiling remaining in town. Ben Owens's, like most stores in town, is remembered as General Merchandise. It operated in this space for many years. This nicely decorated storefront was the home of Earl Ellis's Soda Shop, for many years a Fountain institution. Hugh Lowe, Herman Owens, and Leroy Owens all operated general merchandise stores in this space. J.L. Peel's General Merchandise operated here. He also sold groceries. R.A. Fountain built this store to house his furniture sales business. It was later Stokes General Merchandise and became Owens Grocery in 1976. R.A. Fountain's General Merchandise store also specialized in hardware and building supplies. On the second floor was a casket room where model caskets were displayed. Mr. Fountain started the first business in downtown about 1904, when the only way to get out of town was on the East Carolina Railway. This was at least the 4th place of business for what was officially known as Fountain and Company. Today, the building houses Atkinson's Flower Shop and the Red Top Game Room, which opens onto the alley. Smith Yelverton sold agricultural supplies and general merchandise. M.D. Yelverton Company was established in 1912 with L.D. and J.R. Eagles, and for a while this business was Smith Eagles, but in 1919 it became Smith Yelverton. Today it houses the Lester Gay Windmill Collection, which was bequeathed by Mr. Gay to the town's fire and rescue squad. Across the street you'll find the badly decaying Fountain Motor Company. Built in 1927, it was one of the town's most interesting buildings, but today it's a mess. Once it housed a garage, showroom, and gasoline service bay. Next door, where James Bunn runs his cabinet shop, was the original Owens Grocery. One part of the store contained Mosley's Barber Shop. R.A. Gardner's General Merchandise store was built by R.J. Proctor in 1917, just after he completed the Fountain building. It was originally 2 stories, but a fire in the early 1920s left it in ruins, and it was salvaged as the building you see today. The brickwork on the east wall shows the lines of damage and rebuilding. On this lot stood Cook's Pressing Club, built in the 20s, and somewhere in this near vicinity was Gardner's Bar. Legend has it that when it burned, some local men raced in, people thought to save the structure, but they were really saving the barrels of whiskey. Down Home Hair Designs has been operated by Ethel Batts in this spot since 1986. and William Corbett has had his barbershop here since 1974. It was built for a previous barber, J. Lord Horton. The Wellness Center was for many years Beasley Drugs, operated by Bruce Beasley, the town physician's son. On the Wellness Center's parking lot stood the town's grandest building, known when it was constructed in 1910 as the Development Building. It housed the Bank of Fountain, the post office, the town hall, a courtroom, a dance hall, an early telegraph station, and Jefferson's general merchandise. Before the theater opened, movies were screened on its east wall and patrons were seated on the lawn. It was demolished in 1999 to make the Wellness Center's parking lot. That concludes the walking tour, but several other nearby sites are worth noting. The bus station was built in the early 1940s and also housed a garage. It flourished when US 258 was a primary artery for commerce and tourism. Hemby's Funeral Home was begun by Elder Simon Hemby, one of the town's most prominent citizens. He was a primitive Baptist preacher who also had a general merchandise store in this building, where he acted as the unofficial banker for the elderly black community of Fountain. The site of what was once called Slabtown is near the community store where US 258 and Old 258 split. The East Carolina Railway originally stopped here, but downtown Fountain developed around the depot instead. The first church to organize in Fountain was Reed's Chapel Missionary Baptist Church, which was founded on this site about 1904. It was burned about 1955, probably by local Klansmen, and the church relocated to its present site. The Fountain Colored School and a Masonic Hall were adjacent to the church. Trevathan Pond was originally known as Baker's Fish Pond. It was reworked by Earl Trevathan after he purchased it about 1950 when a new dam and spillway were installed. Several area businesses sell passes to fish here, and it's nearly circled by a good walking path that crosses over the dam. Fountain High School was built on this site in 1923. After the high school was incorporated into Farmville schools in the late 40s, it housed an elementary school until about 1960. The stately gym was built by the WPA about 1938. Before you leave Fountain, stop by the Martin Marietta Rock Quarry's gazebo for a spectacular view you won't find anywhere else in the region. And please come back to Fountain. With an elevation of 111 feet, we're the peak experience of Pitt County.
I'm a rag, I'm a rag, I'm a rag, I'm a ragtime millionaire. All you little people take your hat off to me, 'cause I'm a ragtime millionaire. Mr. Henry's gonna buy me a Ford each month. Everybody else is gonna take my junk. Gonna put a little sign on it, said in God we trust. You know I don't mean to have no fuss. All you little people take your hat off to me, 'cause I'm a ragtime millionaire. I'm a rag, I'm a rag, I'm a rag, I'm a ragtime millionaire. All you little people take your hat off to me, 'cause I'm a ragtime millionaire. Now some of you boys think that I'm gonna be late, but I'm pleased to tell you I got a 98. Some of you boys think you're gonna catch me last, but all I gotta do is just step on the gas. All you little people take your hat off to me, 'cause I'm a ragtime millionaire. I'm a rag, I'm a rag, I'm a rag, I'm a ragtime millionaire. All you little people take your hat off to me, 'cause I'm a ragtime millionaire.